Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all those that took part in an enormous democratic exercise in this country, which concluded with me being elected as leader of the Labour Party and leader of the opposition. I think we can be very proud of the numbers of people who engaged and took part in all those debates. I've taken part in many events around the country and had conversations with many people about what they thought about this place, our Parliament, our democracy and our conduct within this place. And many told me that they thought Prime Minister's question time was too theatrical, that Parliament was out of touch and too theatrical, and they wanted things done differently, but above all they wanted their voice heard in Parliament. So I thought my first Prime Minister's question time, I'd do it in a slightly different way. And I'm sure the Prime Minister is going to absolutely welcome this, as he welcomed this idea in 2005. But something seems to have happened to his memory during that period. And so I sent out an email to thousands of people and asked them what questions they would like to put to the Prime Minister. And I received 40,000 replies. Now, there isn't time to ask 40,000 questions today, and our rules limit us to 6. And so I would like to start with the first one, which is about housing. 2,500 people emailed me about the housing crisis in this country. And I asked one from a woman called Marie, who says, "What does the government intend to do about the chronic lack of affordable housing and the extortionate rents charged by some private sector landlords in this country?" Prime Minister.
Prime Minister. Well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, can I congratulate the honourable gentleman on his resounding victory in the Labour leadership election? Can I welcome him to the front bench and to these exchanges? I know we will have many strong disagreements, I'm sure, between us at these exchanges, but where we can work together in the national interest, we should do so, and I wish him well in his job. If we are able to change Prime Minister's questions and to make it a more genuine exercise in asking questions and answering questions, no one would be more delighted than me. I felt last week where we discussed a substantial issue with substantial questions and proper answers was good for our House, good for our democracy, and so I welcome it. Now let me answer very directly Marie's question, because we do need to see more affordable housing in our country. We delivered 260,000 affordable housing units in the last Parliament. We built more council houses in our country than in the 13 previous years had been managed, but I recognise much more needs to be done. That means carrying on with our reform of the planning system. It means encouraging the building industry to come up with innovative schemes like starter homes. But above all, it means continuing to support the aspirations of people to be able to afford their own home, which is where Help to Buy and schemes like that come in. But I'd say to the honourable gentleman, we won't get Britain building unless we keep our economy going.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and I thank him for his commitment that we're going to try and do Prime Minister's question time in a more adult way than we've done in the past. The effects of government policy on housing are obviously enormous, and the decision made to cut, for example, 1% of the rent levels in councils and in housing associations without thinking about the funding issues that those authorities face is a serious one. I've got a question from Stephen, who works for a housing association, who says that the cut in rents will mean that the company he works for will lose 150 jobs by next March because of the loss of funding of that housing association to carry on with the repairs. Down the line, it will mean worse conditions, worse maintenance and fewer people working in it, and a greater problem for those living in those properties. Does the Prime Minister not think it's time to reconsider the question of the funding of the administration of housing, as well as, of course, the massive gap of 100,000 units a year between what is needed and what is being built?
Minister.
What I would say to Stephen and all those working in housing associations and doing a good job is that I think for years in our country we had something of a merry-go-round where rents went up, housing benefit went up, and so taxes had to go up to pay for that. And I think it was right in the budget to cut the rents that social tenants pay, not least because those people who are working and not on housing benefit will see a further increase in their take-home pay and be able to afford more things in life. Now, I think it's vital, though, that we reform housing associations and make sure they are more efficient. Frankly, they're a part of the public sector that hasn't been through efficiencies, haven't improved their performance, and I think it's about time that they did.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I thank the Prime Minister for that, but it leads me neatly on to what happened yesterday in the House when the House sadly voted through proposals which are going to cost £1,300 per year to families affected by the change in tax credits. This is absolutely shameful. I had more than 1,000 questions on tax credits. Paul, for example, says this very heartfelt question: why is the government taking tax credits away from families? We need this money to survive so our children don't suffer. Paying rent and council tax on a low income doesn't leave you much. Tax credits play a vital role, and more is needed to stop us having to become reliant on food banks to survive.
What we need is a country where work genuinely pays, and that's why what our proposals do are reform welfare, but at the same time bring in a national living wage, which will mean anyone on the lowest rate of pay will get a £20 a week pay rise next year. And that's why the figures show that a family... So I thought this was the new question time. I'm not sure the message has fully got home. I don't want to blind the House with statistics, but I just give you these two. One, a family with someone on minimum wage, after all our changes, will be £2,400 better off. Second statistic, and I think this is really important. If you look at what happened between 1998 and 2009, in-work poverty went up by 20% at the same time as in-work benefits went from 6 billion to 28 billion. The old way of doing things isn't working, and we shouldn't go back to it. What we've got to do is tackle the causes of poverty, get people back to work, improve our schools, improve childcare. Those are the ways we can create an economy where work pays and everyone's better off.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies says there are 8 million people in paid work eligible for benefits or tax credits. They are, on average, being compensated by just 26% of their losses by the so-called national living wage that the government has introduced. And so I ask a question from Claire, who says this: how is changing the thresholds of entitlement for tax credits going to help hard-working people or families? I work part-time. My husband works full-time, earning £25,000. They have 5 children. This decrease in tax credits will see our income plummet. They ask a simple question: how is this fair?
The country has to live within its means, and we were left an unaffordable welfare system and a system where work didn't pay. Now, we see today the latest set of employment statistics where the rate of employment in our country has reached, yet again, a record high. More people in work, more people in full-time work, and also we're seeing unemployment fall in every region of the country except the South East, and the sharpest falls are in the North West, the North East and the West Midlands. What we're doing is moving from an economy with low wages, high tax and high welfare to an economy where we have higher wages, lower taxes and less welfare. That is the right answer: an economy where work pays, an economy where people can get on. And let us not go back to the days of unlimited welfare. Labour's position again today is to abolish the welfare cap. I say that a family that chooses not to work shouldn't be better off than one that chooses to work.
Many people don't have that choice. Many people live in a very difficult situation and rely on the welfare state in order to survive. Surely all of us have a responsibility to make sure people can live properly and decently in modern Britain. That is surely a decent civil thing to do. I received over 1,000 questions on the situation facing our mental health services and people that suffer from mental health conditions. This is a very, very serious situation across the whole country, and I want to put to the Prime Minister a question that was put to me quite simply from Gail. Do you think it's acceptable that the mental health services in this country are on their knees at the present time?
Prime Minister.
Well, as I mentioned before the first question, there will be areas where we can work together, and I believe this is one of them. We do need to do more to increase mental health services in our country. We've made some important steps forward in recent years. Mental health and physical health now have parity in the NHS constitution. We've introduced for the first time waiting time targets for mental health services, so they're not seen as a Cinderella service. And of course, we've made the commitment, a commitment that I hope he will back, undoing previous Labour policy. We've backed the Stevens plan for an extra £8 billion into the NHS in this Parliament, which can help to fund better mental health services, among other things. There are problems in some mental health services, and it's right we make that commitment. But I make this one point to him. We will not have a strong NHS unless we have a strong economy. And if the Labour Party is going to go down the route of unlimited spending, unlimited borrowing, unlimited tax rates, printing money, they will wreck the economic security of our country and the family security of every family in our country. We won't be able to afford a strong NHS without a strong economy.
If I could take the Prime Minister back to the situation of mental health in this country, it is very serious. I agree with him absolutely on parity of service. I hope that the spending commitments are brought forward rather than delayed to the end of this Parliament, because the crisis is a very serious one. We know this from our constituents, we know this from people we meet, we know this from the devastation that many face, and indeed some have taken their own lives because of the devastation they face. I asked a question from Angela, who's a mental health professional, so she knows exactly what she's talking about. And she quotes this: "Beds are unobtainable, with the result that people suffering serious mental health crises are either left without adequate care or alternatively admitted to facilities many miles away from their homes, relatives and family support systems. The situation is simply unacceptable." What does the Prime Minister say to Angela, to people like her who work so hard in the mental health services, or people going through a mental health crisis who may well be watching us today on Prime Minister's Question Time and want to know that we take seriously their conditions, we take seriously their need for emergency beds to be near their homes and their support system, and that we as a society take seriously their plight and are going to help them and care for them. What does the Prime Minister say to Angela?
Well, what I would say to Angela, all those working in mental health, or indeed those suffering from mental health conditions, is that we need to do more as a country to help tackle mental health. Now, that's obviously money into the health service, which we will deliver, but it's also changing the way that the health service helps those with mental health conditions. The honourable gentleman rightly talks about mental health beds, and they are important, but frankly, so is the service that people get when they visit their GP. Many people going to our GP surgeries have mental health conditions, but actually aren't treated for those conditions and don't get access to, for instance, the cognitive behavioural therapies that are increasingly being made available. So my argument is, yes, put in the resources, change the way the NHS works, change public attitudes to mental health, because that is vital. But I say it again, we won't be able to do any of these things without the strong economy that we've built these last 5 years.
Mr. Andrew Turner.
The Isle of Wight Zoo is having difficulty